that when we were on the last show with Reverend Rebecca, we talked about playing too small a little bit, and I think it ties perfectly into our topic today. Before we get started, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got involved with the center and actually in this teaching, and then we'll dive into today's topic.
Well, I've been in this teaching, I guess, about 20 years now, and I actually met somebody in a yoga. We started a conversation, and she said, "You should come to my center," and I did, and I sat down and immediately sobbed. I sobbed through the entire service. I had moved here from Massachusetts, and there isn't a lot of New Thought in Massachusetts, even though it was the birthplace in a lot of ways, Emerson and the Transcendentalist. There wasn't any New Thought in the area I lived in. But this teaching was what I always carried in my heart and what I always believed to be true, but I didn't know there were others. So when I walked into the center for the first time, I felt such a sense of relief and connection and being home. And I never looked back, and that's 20 years later, and I've just kept moving forward.
You know, when we talk about this, we're talking about, like, you had this sense of feeling at home or belonging. How is that different than going to, I'm going to say, organized religion or what you'd experienced before, and why this emotional relief that you had, or this release that you had, to know that this is where you should be?
I think there's something within us that resonates to the truth of who we are, to our true nature, and to how things work. I think we all intuitively know that on different levels. And when you come here to these centers, to the Centers for Spiritual Living, nobody's telling you how to think or what to think. They just teach you how to think in a way that is useful, because your thoughts are creative. There's a creative energy that surrounds us, that is us. It's everything. It makes up everything. So learning how to engage that creative energy at the highest levels to create the experience of life that you choose is all that really happens here. Every week we talk about it in a different way. In every class, we're discussing it from different angles and refining it and getting better and better at using this energy to create the lives we want. But there's no hard and fast rules. You get to do with it whatever you choose. No one's telling you, no, you can't create that, or that's not correct, or that's not right. As Reverend Rebecca said in the last show, there are no rules here. It's you get what you choose to focus on, where you choose to direct the energy. And that is a really powerful place to be.
You know, before I came to the center, 11 or 12 years ago, and I've always been this way. I've always been into self-help. And to me, it felt like every time I go to self-help, when I left, it was motivation, there was inspiration, there were some tools that I could take out. And I remember the first day my wife and I came, it was like, how come I haven't heard of this? This is self-help, right? Because as Reverend Rebecca said, and I'm sure you can reinforce it, it's from inside.
Absolutely.
I'm not looking for Joe over there to help me. Joe may end up helping me, but I have to start here first.
Absolutely.
And so that's where it felt like this was all self-help with just even more specific tools and strategies to help me do that.
Absolutely.
Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. That's a great assessment. It is an inside job. And like I said, there's something within us that knows the truth. And I think as a young child, I really resonated with this teaching, having not heard of it, resonated with the truth of that creative energy that is everywhere present. I actually had kind of a mystical experience when I was about 8 years old, where I experienced that energy. And then I felt like I fell asleep for a decade or two and forgot. And when I sat in the Religious Science Center for Spiritual Living, all of a sudden, I remembered. I remembered who I was, I remembered how things worked, and it just clicked in place for me.
I love that. Well, we're going to talk about a topic today that's a little bit different, but I think it ties perfectly into Reverend Rebecca's talk. It's the power of vulnerability. tell us why you chose that topic. Is there a story behind that? What's driven you to talk about that? And then how can that help our viewers?
Absolutely. To me, it sounds funny to say the power of vulnerability because I think most of us avoid being vulnerable. It's scary, it's uncomfortable. But as a former teacher of mine said, a little discomfort is a small price to pay for enlightenment. And I love that. That really stayed with me. Am I willing to be a little uncomfortable in the moment in order to get where I want to go? Because generally speaking, if you're up to something big, if you've moved from playing small to playing a bigger game, you're going to be a little uncomfortable, and vulnerability is just the price. And I've learned through my own experiences that vulnerability is the gateway to everything good. Everything good lays on the other side of that experience of vulnerability.
Maybe you've seen this. You watching, I'm sure you've seen this, where you see this circle, and you probably see it on social media. There's a circle, and then there's a dot way out here on the other side, and it says comfort zone.
Yeah.
And this is where all the magic happens.
Absolutely.
It's outside the comfort zone.
That's a great metaphor.
Is that this whole idea of vulnerability is like getting outside your comfort zone because that's where the magic happens?
Absolutely. And I know what I am speaking of. I began my adult life journey as an agoraphobic. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a fear of the outside world. So basically a fear of everything. Imagine every phobia put together in one place. And that was my life. I didn't really leave my home much for, I'd say, close to 15 years. So I had to one day decide to be vulnerable and take a leap of faith. And with my intuition to guide me, and having done some spiritual work, and remembering back to when I was a child and I understood that there was a universal energy supporting me, waking back up to that, I took a huge leap and felt very vulnerable, packed up my car and moved from Massachusetts to California, because that was the thing that I thought would scare me the most. That would be the scariest thing I could do.
We talk about with what you're talking about. I mean, that's an extreme example.
It's a very extreme example.
So I don't think there's anyone more qualified in this room for sure to talk about how the heck did you do that? How did you go from 15 years in isolation,
basically semi-ice,
to get in a car and drive all the way across the country, 2,500, 3,000 miles, into an environment you knew nothing about, and start all over again? How did you do that? And what are those steps?
Well, I actually watched a movie, and in that movie, someone talked about doing the thing that scares you the most. And if you did the thing that scared you the most, you would be free. And it stuck in my mind. I could not get it out. And one day, this guidance just flooded my body that said, do the thing that scares you the most, and you will be free. And I thought, what would that be? And suddenly I remembered I was supposed to be living in California. When I was younger, I actually traveled here a couple times in my teenage years and thought, this is where I want to live. And then again, I forgot for quite some time. So when I had that intuition, I was willing to listen to it. I was willing to be vulnerable. And I did get support. I was so blessed to have willing to drive across country with me, because at that point I wasn't driving at all. So I couldn't even drive around the block. I couldn't walk around the block. So it was a pretty giant step for me. But I was willing to listen to my own inner guidance and to take a leap of absolute faith. And boy, am I glad I did. Wow.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. It is a gift that you're sharing with us. Take just a moment and tell us, as someone who is not facing their fear, not being vulnerable, What is that life like compared to today, where you say, where I suspect now you probably go bungee jumping and zip lining and whatever. How are those two people radically different? And then tell us that first step you took to make that difference. Like, I know you just got in the car, you had some support, but you said you had that movie that you watched and it just kept ringing in your head,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So again, take us, what's the difference between that person then and this person today?
So that person then was afraid of everything. And fear is like a snowball going downhill. It gathers steam. Steam, not a good metaphor for a snowball, but it's like a snowball going, and it gathers power as it goes, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So is faith. So is being courageous. It gathers like energy to itself. And that is the truth of everything. Energy gathers like energy. And so if you are being courageous and you're willing to take that first step and build upon it, the next step will be easier. And pretty soon, when you understand that ability to be vulnerable and to bridge that gap from vulnerability to where you want to be, from where you are to where you want to go, and you see how it works and that it does work, trust me, you will be excited. So now when I get nervous about something or something invites my little monkey mind, and for those of you who don't know, monkey mind is a Buddhist term, and it's the part of our mind that swings from worry to doubt and back to worry again. When I trigger monkey mind in myself now, something big comes up, I get excited. I think to myself, I'm up to something big. Something wonderful is about to happen. So you can go from being afraid all the time to being excited when you do get a little nervous about something or fear comes up. It's a sign you're up to something big. It's a sign something wonderful's about to happen. Now before, I thought it was a sign something was wrong.
Yes.
It's not. But we've been told it is,
Sure,
right?
sure.
We go into this mode where we feel like we need to avoid fear and discomfort. We've been taught to avoid discomfort. We shouldn't avoid discomfort. Discomfort is a small price to pay for enlightenment, and it's a small price to pay to get to your dreams and your desires and to experience what you choose to experience.
I love that. You know, there's a phrase called reframing, and when you talk about fear and excitement, when it's measured, it's exactly the same. It's
Yep.
just how we frame it.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
Yes.
as you said, now when you have that monkey mind, you framed it to be excitement that something
Yes.
great's going to happen. That's powerful, gang. If you haven't
It
done
is.
this, write that down.
Yes.
If you missed everything else, write that down. Because it's amazing how many emotions we have
Yep.
that when you say it's swinging from one side, let's say from negative to positive,
Yeah.
it's how we frame it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we talk ourselves out of our greatness. When we listen to monkey mind, and by the way, it never tells you the truth. It just doesn't.
Bad monkey.
Bad monkey. You know, I joke about my monkey mind now. I say when I hear it, I just give it a banana. You know, it's like, here, have a banana and relax, because we're going to do this. Nevertheless, despite the objections that come up in my own mind, most powerful word I ever learned was nevertheless. Nevertheless. And take the next step. And it doesn't need to be a giant leap. You don't have to get in your car and drive 3,000 miles. It can be small and sweet. And you build that muscle. You build the muscle. You begin to gather evidence for your greatness rather than your smallness.
I love that. So, just to recap, no matter where you are, you can get to where you want to be.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a huge leap,
Absolutely.
but that building of momentum, no matter whether it's a snowball going downhill, it can be, again, reframed. That snowball can be momentum for great things.
Absolutely.
Right? But if you go into it knowing it is a momentum and take that first step,
Yes.
it's like saying, you know, you're going to drive across country, which you did. I don't know if you drove at night at all,
Yes.
but those headlights only see maybe, what, a couple hundred yards in front of you.
Absolutely.
But you kept driving even though you couldn't see any further than 200 yards. Why?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I keep driving in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't need to know anymore. which is really a wonderful place to be. I used to have to know exactly where I was going, what it was going to look like, how it was going to turn out. I don't need that anymore. I just absolutely trust that that creative energy of the universe is carrying me exactly where I need to go. And I listen to my intuition, and it nudges me here and it nudges me there. It says, say yes when Jeff says, would you like to be on this show? Just say yes, because Monkey Mind went, no, you don't want to do that. Here's the banana. Yes, I would love to be on this show.
I love it. Well, if you're just joining us for the first time, this is called Spirituality Uncorked. I'm Jeff Harrison, along with Lori Savage, and we're talking today about vulnerability and really the power of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And if you missed Lori's story because you got involved late, go back and listen to it. You're going to be amazed at how vulnerable she became and how she reframed that vulnerability into power. So, any last thoughts before we wrap up? Because I really want to keep digging at this and keep going deeper, because I'm sure this is like layer one, right?
Yes.
And take a little deeper. But any last thoughts before we wrap up today?
If I can do it, you can do it. I mean, this is within each and every one of us. Vulnerability is your superpower. Put your tiara or your cape on and just go for it. Take that next step, and trust me, each step gets easier and easier and more joyous.
I love it. And remember, Lori said she found home here when she came to the Center for Spiritual Living.
Yes.
That is true. It could be true for you. If you want to get involved and you're watching this program for the first time, come join us at the corner of Shadow Mountain and Portola here in Palm Desert. We meet on Sundays at 10 a.m. We have one service during the summer in the off season, and then during season we're at 9 and 11. If for some reason you're not in the area and you'd like to join us, you can always go to our website, cslpalmdesert.org, and on the homepage there is a button for live streaming. That starts at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'd love to have you. In the meantime, make sure you mark your calendar. Join us every week. We're going to have a different practitioner back here once every week, and we're going to talk about topics that are important to you to move your life further down that hill, just like a small snowball. Lori, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Harrison, along with
Lori Savage.
We'll see you again next time on
Spirituality Uncorked.
Take Care.